Hello, so this is for the subject Church Financial Management, and we are now on Chapter 9. Chapter 9 is actually tax compliance, but for some reason, the first page of these materials is showing us Chapter 10. Sorry about that, but it's Chapter 9 tax compliance. Okay. But for this discussion, I'm not going to use the material because this is US based, um, quite different from what we have here in the Philippines. Okay, so instead of going through this one, well, some of the information, for example, this part here, key elements of private inurement and excess benefit transactions provisions. You can, what do you call it? You can consider the examples provided. In a way, they are quite true even here in the Philippines. Examples of private inurement and excess benefit transactions is in a church, the following. Okay, and then I think there's also examples here, examples to check or to establish whether something is permissible or not. So these examples are good. It also holds true for what we have here in the Philippines. This part here, political campaign intervention, we do have separation of the church and the government here in the Philippines, but there's a certain gray area, so I'm not sure. Lobbying, violation of public policy, this also holds true, this part here. And then unrelated business income, that would also hold true. Payroll taxes, since the church is employing church workers and we pay them salaries and wages, if they are subject to withholding of income tax from their compensation, then the church is obliged to, what do you call it, to deduct and withhold their taxes and then remit the same to the BIR directly. Okay, and then of course to file and pay the corresponding tax returns. Okay. What else? Helpful resources, IRS inquiries and examinations. In the Philippines, the equivalent of this is BIR investigation or VIR audit. Okay. Tax examinations, and then you have to, if ever the church is subject to an examination, a tax audit or tax examination, then they must be able to provide the church records, um, so that the examination could proceed smoothly. Then you have your religious activities. Um, Again, it's also important, if you're not sure what's going on, then seek representation or seek help from a professional, either a CPA or CPA lawyer, if ever you have that. Okay. And then you have your tax exemption. We'll be using uh, a different material. Okay. So I'll be providing you with a copy of this. RMO, Revenue Memorandum Order number 38-2019. Okay. So this is from the Bureau of Internal Revenue here in the Philippines. This is about the tax exemption of non-stock, non-profit corporations under Section 30 of the NIRC Code of NIRC of 1997. Essentially, we call this the Tax Code of 1997. Okay. Churches are normally registered as non-profit corporation, and because there's that, what do you call it? There's that statement about, um, no no fund, or there's no inurement of benefit to another third person. So essentially, churches cannot be registered as stock corporation, because stock is sometimes, what do you call it? It connotates the provision of dividends or profit. So churches can only be registered as non-stock and non-profit corporations. Okay. So for the background, Section 30, it's the portion of the tax code which provides which organizations or types of organizations can avail of tax exemptions. Okay, so Section 30 enumerates only 11 kinds of organizations and expressly provides that such organizations shall not be taxed under Title 2, Tax on Income or Income Tax, in respect to income received by them as such. Okay, so we have the list of organizations here, but we'll focus on churches and educational institutions. The educational institution would be useful if there is a Bible school, okay, if the church also operates a Bible school. Okay, so the second section is about the characteristics and nature of organizations of the corporations under Section 30. We're going to skip this. This is labor organizations, mutual savings, beneficiary society, cemetery company. Okay. Uh, Section E, non-stock corporation or association organized and operated exclusively for religious purposes. Okay, so and then there's this part here, or there's this statement: no part of its net income or asset belongs to or inures to the benefit of any member, organizer, officer, or any specific person. It is for this because of this statement. It is for this reason that churches are quite careful about letting someone use the property of the church. Okay, so even if we have church vehicles, we don't let one person or church member to use it for their personal uh personal transactions or personal travel. Okay, the church property must be used for church activities only. Okay, no part of the net income or asset inures to the benefit of any member, organizer, or officer, or any specific person. Okay, so you can only use them for church purposes or religious purposes. Characteristics: non-stock corporation or association, organized and operated exclusively, okay, not for any other purpose. Religious, so church would fall under religious purpose. No part of its income or asset belongs to or inures to the benefit of any member, organizer, officer, or any specific person. Okay. Normally, if any of these what do you call it, characteristic or requirement is not satisfied, then the tax exemption may not be granted, or if it's already granted, it may be revoked. Okay, the tax exemption may be removed if the BIR is able to what do you call it, is able to prove that someone is benefiting, okay, specific person is benefiting from the asset or net income of the church. Okay. Corporate purposes, religious, refers to the promotion, propagation, and accomplishment of any form of religion, creed, or religious belief recognized by the government of the Republic of the Philippines. Okay. Gonna skip the others. Actual operation. A corporation is exempt from tax on its income if it meets two tests. So we have the organizational test: organized and operated for one or more of the above specified purposes. In the case of church, religious purposes. And secondly, no part of its net income or assets inures to the benefit of private stockholders or individuals. So if you notice, they're really emphasizing this statement. We've encountered this statement a few times already. Okay. We're going to skip this one. Civic League. Okay. So for Bible school, Bible college, so this one may apply. Non-stock, non-profit educational institution. So the requirements, or for the characteristics: established by law or local government unit, administered and financially subsidized by the government or the local government concerned, governed by the Board of Trustees or Board of Regents, and then you have last one, supervised by DepEd or CHED. So as long as it's recognized by DepEd or CHED, then it's possible to apply for tax exemption. Corporate purposes established as an educational institution, financed and operated by an agency of the government, DepEd or CHED, which does not charge tuition fees. Instead, financing is obtained through taxes or other government collected revenues. Oh, okay, wait, what? Hey, this sounds like government operated educational institutions, but anyway, but it's the same. As long as a private school is recognized by DepEd or CHED, it is governed by a board of trustees. It's properly registered as a corporation, then that's good to go. Okay, it's essentially the same. So this institution operates as a primary or secondary school, a college, or a professional or trade school that has a regularly scheduled curriculum, a regular faculty, and a regularly enrolled student body in attendance at a place where the educational activities are regularly carried on. Okay, so we have that. Skip farmers, farmers. Okay, so this one. Operational and organizational tests in determining entitlement to exemption. Here in the Philippines, before these organizations, before the church and the Bible college is able to avail of the tax exemption, there are certain requirements, and one of them is that they must be in operation for at least 3 years, and then they must be able to provide the audited financial statements for those 3 years. Okay, essentially, what the BIR wants to check is if the organization is really operating for their specific purpose, and then they want to check those financial statements to prove that claim, and then also to see if the funds are exclusively used for religious or educational purpose, and then none of those funds were were used to benefit a specific person or a specific officer or member or worker of the church. Okay, so there is that. um the requirements for the grant of tax exemption are specified by the law granting it, and such grant is strictly construed against the taxpayer, because an exemption restricts the collection of taxes necessary for the existence of the government. So it falls on the management of the church or the Bible school to prove that they are, what do you call it? They are exempted, and that the requirements for the tax exemption, they are able to, what do you call it? What's the word for that? That you comply with the requirements. Okay, so if the BIR would check the requirements, and then if there is any doubt with regards to the requirements, it would fall on the church or the Bible school to prove that they really comply with the requirements. Okay, if there's any question of it, then the tax exemption may not be granted. So you have to prove without a doubt, okay, that you are exempted. Okay, so we have this eto, the corporation claiming tax exemption must be able to show clearly that it is organized and operated for the purpose, okay, religious or educational. Organizational test. This requires that the corporation or association's constitutive documents, the SEC registration, the articles of incorporation, and the bylaws. These are, documents submitted to register with SEC. Must show that its primary purpose of incorporation fall under Section 30 of the tax code. Okay. In the articles of incorporation, the primary purpose is one of the section, so they must state clearly that they are for religious purposes or for educational purpose. Operational test. This requires that the regular activities of the corporation or association be exclusively devoted to the accomplishment of the purposes specified in Section 30. A corporation which fails to meet this test, A corporation fails to meet this test if the corporation has no activities conducted in the furtherance of the purpose for which it was organized. That's why they require 3 years of financial statements, or if a substantial part of its operations constitutes activities conducted for profit. Okay, since churches and educational institutions are, not for profit, if they are registered as not for profit, then the financial statements must be able to show or prove that there's really no profit given to specific people. Okay, although there is profit, but it's used for the furtherance of the purpose of the organization. Okay, so there's that. And then you have this one, non-profit, no inurement, non-profit and inurement prohibition. Corporations falling under Section 30 must be non-profit. Non-profit means that no income or asset accrues to or benefits any member or specific person, with all the net income or asset devoted to the institution's purposes and all its activities conducted not for profit. Okay, so all the funds, all the receipts that the church may receive, they must be used exclusively for the programs of the church. Okay, for the, to support the mission and the purpose of the church. Thus, in order for an entity to qualify as nonprofit exempt from an income tax, it must demonstrate that its earnings or assets do not inure to the benefit of any of its trustees, organizers, officers, members, or any specific person. It must not be organized or operated for the benefit of private interests, such as specific individuals, incorporators, or his family, shareholders of the organization, or persons controlled directly or indirectly by such private interests. The organization must serve a public rather than a private purpose. Okay, that's why churches are also careful not to conduct activities that may be considered for profit, because it may be a cause for the tax exemption to be revoked. Okay, possibly. Okay, the following are considered inurements of such nature: payment of compensation, salaries or honorarium to its trustees or organizers. Okay, if a person is holding a particular job for the church, consider the church worker, and is doing something for the church, then payment of compensation is reasonable. Okay, but if you're paying someone who's not doing any work, okay, you're paying them because they're part of the organization, they're a trustee, they're one of the organizers, then that's not reasonable. Okay, payment of exorbitant or unreasonable compensation. So again, it must be reasonable, within the norms. It shouldn't be excessive. Provision of welfare aid and financial assistance to its members. An organization is not exempt from income tax if its principal activity is to receive and manage funds associated with savings or investment programs. So a church shouldn't do this. Okay, uh, this is like savings or co-op activities, not a church activity. Donation to any person or entity, except donations made to other entities formed for the purpose or purposes similar to its own. But yeah, if it's donation made to, help a worker or someone, as long as it's within the religious purpose, then it's fine. Okay. But again, if it's not reasonable, if there's no good reason to give donation to a particular person, then that may be questioned. Purchase of goods or services in excess of the fair market value from an entity in which one or more of its trustees, officers, or fiduciaries have an interest. Okay, this is also why churches try to avoid um, transacting with members. Okay, let's say you have a member with a business, so and then the church would, let's say, buy something from that member. It's okay as long as the price is within the market value of what the other stores are also selling it for. But if it's for an amount more than the market value, then that would be considered inurement of benefit. So no go. Okay, don't do that. Okay, to avoid suspicion, then let's just avoid it altogether. When upon the solution and satisfaction of all liabilities, remaining assets are distributed to trustees, organizers, officers, or members. Again, don't do that. Assets of the church must be used only by the church for its mission or purpose. Okay. Organization. Income tax exemption is not absolute. If the BIR sees that there's inurement of benefit to someone, then the exemption may be revoked. If the operation includes for other purpose, especially for business or for profit purposes other than the religious or the educational, so it may also be revoked. Obligations as withholding agent for the government to depend if the church is what do you call it? If there's an obligation to withhold tax from the salaries and wages of the employees, then they would have to remit directly to the BIR the withheld tax. Okay, but only if the workers are subject to tax. If they are not, then there's no need to remit. Okay, because there's no liability for it. So on this part, guidelines in the processing and issuance of certificate of exemption, application essentially. Okay, so these are the documentary requirements. Kindly read on your own sweet time. Again, this is only for the Philippines. Okay, this is issued by the BIR here in the Philippines. And then you have the procedures where to submit the documents, and then you have the validity of tax exemption. It's revalidated for another period of 3 years under the same procedures. Okay, although before, once you're issued with the tax exemption, it's valid for however how long, for no matter how long, as long as you're still able to prove that you comply with the requirements. Okay. So you have that one, and that's it for discussion of chapter 9. Okay, we used a different material. Alright, so that's it for this one. Thank you.